In the last movie, I told you that Rails is structured in such a way that it helps us to write dry code. Remember, don't repeat yourself. In this movie, I want to take a closer look at that, which is the MVC architecture that Rails employs. It's a fundamental aspect of Rails, and it's important to understand right from the start. The M stands for model, the V stands for view, and the C stands for controller. Now, the model is our objects. It's the object-oriented approach to design, and it actually encapsulates the data in our database as well. We can treat those as objects. The view is the presentation layer. It's what the user sees and interacts with, the web pages, the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. The controller is going to process and respond to events, such as user actions, and it's going to invoke changes to the model and the view based on that. It's going to make decisions for us and control what happens. Let's take a look at a couple of diagrams that I think will make it clearer. In the basic web architecture, we have a browser that interacts with a web page. Now, of course, there's a web server sitting in between, but this is a simplified view. And this web page might have lots of code that would make decisions for us and finally output something back to the browser. And it even might interact with the database, right? If it's database enabled, it can pull things out of the database and then return that to the browser. Well, an MVC architecture says, well, instead of having this one page that's all muddied up with all of this different stuff going on it, what if we broke it up and we have the browser that communicates to the controller and just the code involved in making those decisions about what should happen based on those actions? That's what's going to be in the controller. And then if we need to interact with the database or any of our data, we'll have the controller talk to our model, and we'll put all of our code relating to the data and to connecting with the database in the model. Then the model can return its results back to the controller. The controller can go back to the model if it needs. The model can go back to the database, and so on. But finally, when the controller is satisfied that it's ready to return a result to the browser, it's going to then send its results to the view, the presentation layer, which will decide what HTML, JavaScript, CSS, all of that will get returned back to the browser. So essentially, we've just taken that one page, that web page, and broken it up based on its function to controller, model, and view. And Rails is built on this fundamental principle. The controller handles the decisions, the model handles the data, and the view handles the presentation. And we want to try and follow this architecture and keep our code in the right places. Decision code should go in the controller, data code goes in the model, presentation code goes in the view. Rails actually has names for these. It calls the controller action controller and the view action view. The model is active record, not action record, active record. So those are names we're going to become more familiar with as we work with Rails, but that's what Rails calls its pre-built code to deal with these things. So we're going to be accessing parts of active record when we want to write things that deal with the model. Rails also packages together action controller and action view as action pack. So if you ever see action pack, it's just action controller and action view have been grouped together as one thing called action pack. So keep this architecture in your mind as we continue to work. We'll come back and look at the diagram again, but it'll help you to understand how Rails structures things and what it's doing, and most importantly, where we should put our code.